Well, welcome to the 700 Club. The Abraham Accords may soon have a new member, Syria. Israel is talking to Syria about joining the historic Middle East peace agreements.
The surprising development comes as President Trump is wrapping up his trip through the region. Meanwhile, many Israelis are disappointed that he did not make a stop in Israel. Julie Stahl brings us the story from Jerusalem.
Israel is reportedly quietly opening diplomatic channels with the new Syrian regime after President Trump met with the new Syrian leader Ahmed al-Shara in Saudi Arabia and lifted sanctions against the country. President Trump extended an invitation to al-Shara to join the Abraham Accords, and he reportedly said yes, paving the way for Israeli security officials and Syrian regime officials to meet in Azerbaijan about the possibility of the Arab country joining the Abraham Accords. Regional players are interested in pulling Syria out of the grip of Iran, which propped up the former regime of Bashar al-Assad for years. Trump received a warm welcome from United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Trump signed more business deals for the U.S. In Doha, where talks are taking place for the release of the hostages, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, told other mediators that the U.S. doesn't plan to force Israel to end the war in Gaza. Many Israelis were concerned by President Trump's meetings, deals, and offers to leaders that Israel doesn't have good relations with. But Eli Piepsh of the Israel Defense and Security Forum says he believes Trump is a huge friend of Israel, and Trump is just trying to project a strong American foreign policy.
That doesn't mean that President Trump doesn't value the interests of its strong ally, Israel. And I think President Trump has made it clear that values Israel as an ally, sees Israel and the U.S. fighting the same war against the same enemies.
Israelis in Jerusalem had mixed feelings about Trump's visit.
I'm happy he's in the region. I'm not happy he didn't visit Israel. I mean, you have to take it a little bit of an affront, and I'm grateful that he released, that Idan Alexander released.
He's going to do big business over there, so I don't think it's got to do with Israel anything, because he's a friend of Israel.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell, is with us now from Jerusalem. So, Chris, what are the concerns about Syria joining the Abraham Accords?
Well, one of the concerns, Gordon, would be Syria's leader, and can he be trusted given his jihadist past? The question is, can a jihadi leopard change his spots? Al-Shara had a $10 million bounty just about 4 months ago on his head, and that was the U.S. And also, is this a version of what they call the Hudayyah agreement? And that was the strategy used by Prophet Muhammad in Mecca, and that would have a ceasefire until you're strong enough to fight your enemy. On the other hand, Gordon, there are pretty high safeguards for Syria joining the Abraham Accords. One of them would have to deport all foreign terrorists, for one. And so President Trump obviously wants to give Syria a fresh start by lifting those sanctions. And after 15 years of a civil war, it would be a welcome relief. And just a couple of other concerns that people have here in the Middle East anyway is Qatar. Who are they? Can they court the West, but they also fund jihad as they have Hamas for years. And one other concern with all these arms deals, will Israel lose its qualitative military edge with all these arms sales to the Gulf states and Turkey? We'll have to see how that develops.
Well, I've got to confess that in my spirit, I'm actually disquieted by all of this. I think that Israel was on the verge of a great victory in a defeat of the ideology behind Hamas, Hezbollah, and it just seems to have shifted, and power bases that were behind the scenes for a very long period of time have now come to the forefront and seemingly changed the game overnight. Am I wrong in that view, or are we seeing just sort of a retrenchment and a pause so that they can rearm and renew the attack?
We will see. And I think with Saudi Arabia in particular, and maybe the UAE, the first signatory to the Abraham Accords, I think there is a certain sense, that they really do want normalization with Israel, and they want to make sure that these Abraham Accords continue. Some people think differently. The jury is out, so to speak, on Syria. Will they be transformed? And also Qatar. A lot of people have concerns about Qatar, the way they have funded so many things in the West with their sort of soft power, but continue their jihadist ideology.
Well, I was talking about Qatar. They were the funder of Hamas. And, you know, Iran's the funder of Hezbollah. And are we seeing an emergence of Turkey, of these ISIS elements in Syria? And are we just changing the names of the groups, but the ideology stays the same?
Well, we're definitely seeing a huge shift in the last several months, Gordon. And ironically, because of Israel's battle against Hezbollah and weakening Hezbollah and Iran inside Syria, that gave the opportunity for HTS, that was the jihadist group by al-Sharaa a few months ago. That's since been disbanded, but also Turkey was able to come in there. So it seems like in the Middle East anyway, Iran is on the decline, Turkey and Syria are on the ascendancy, and they certainly have different plans of what they want the Middle East to look like. But we'll see if all these diplomatic efforts, you know, will transform the Middle East and actually have many countries join the Abraham Accords.
Well, what's your hope for this, and what are the highlights of his trip?
Well, the highlights of the trip, certainly.
Trip, yeah.
Well, certainly an economic bonanza, Gordon, more than $3 trillion in deals. This is the art of the deal on steroids, major deals with companies like Boeing, also Saudi Arabia investing $600 billion in the U.S. And also, you know, as we've talked, there's some progress in the Abraham Accords. President Trump invited Saudi Arabia and Syria. And also, I think there's geopolitical benefits. This is greater U.S. sphere of influence in the Middle East and actually pushing out the influence of China and Russia.
Well, what's next for Israel now that Trump's coming home? What's the next step for Israel?
Well, there's big things, you know, that are happening right now, Gordon. First of all, Gideon's chariots. That's Israel's major drive to finally conquer Gaza and defeat Hamas. 3 divisions on the ground right now. A major change in strategy since October 7th. They're going to clear and hold territory. The other thing, the hostage deal. Will Hamas agree to Steve Witkoff's proposal to release 10 live hostages for but that would not include an end of the war or pull out of IDF troops. Will Hamas accept it? And then the big one, Gordon, the Iran deal. President Trump just announced on Air Force One, they've sent a proposal to Iran. Will they accept that? And we'll see what happens. And then finally, there's hope anyway for an expansion of the Abraham Accords with more countries joining in the next several months.
All right, well, let's continue to hold on to hope. Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem, thanks so much for your insight, and keep being the watchman on the wall.
Thanks, Gordon.
Well, in other news, a high-stakes Supreme Court case could limit the power of federal judges to block presidential actions nationwide. John Jessup has that story and more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. At the center of the dispute, an executive order from President Trump denying birthright citizenship. But the key issue in the case, can a single district judge stop a presidential order for the entire country? CBN's Bertie Carter has our report.
One of the most powerful tools available to judges, the nationwide injunction, took center stage at the High Court.
So in answer to Justice Gorsuch's point, we've had universal injunctions in some form, correct? Since the founding.
That's right. If I can make 2 points on that, Justice Sotomayor.
Correct?
Exactly.
At the center of Thursday's hearing, President Trump's order to end birthright citizenship for children of parents who aren't citizens themselves. Several judges halted it with nationwide injunctions. Before weighing the policy itself, now the court will decide how far a single judge's power can go.
We have a system. The system works well the way it's designed. The only thing that's not happening is the president's not getting the outcomes he desires.
Legal expert Mike Fox says this is exactly what courts are supposed to do, while others like Paul Larkin with the Heritage Foundation think a single district judge should not have that much power.
Not only are district court judges acting like little Supreme Courts, they're also acting like little Congresses. They've gone way beyond their assigned role in our federal system.
Even as justices focused on judicial power, the issue at hand kept pulling them in.
We have another case where we said that even if your parents are here illegally, if you're born here, you're a citizen.
Justice Amy Coney Barrett implied this case is not ready for a decision on the merits of birthright citizenship.
And the reason why you didn't ask for both here is because you think that the merits question needs percolation.
Yes, but also more fundamentally, it illustrates that the very problem with these nationwide injunctions is they force this rushed, fast and furious decisions on the merits.
A ruling in the coming months could reset the balance between the court and the White House. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Thank you, Brody. Turning overseas to Europe, where the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association will host the largest gathering on Christian evangelism in 25 years later this month in Berlin. CBN's Wendy Griffith has the story.
It's Europe's largest gathering on Christian evangelism in 25 years. The last time was in Holland, where evangelists and ministers from across the world gathered for Amsterdam 2000.
Where are you from?
India.
Holland!
Nigeria. Kazakhstan.
It was a moment seen as a passing of the torch by the Reverend Billy Graham, who couldn't make the conference due to health problems, to the world's evangelists.
For many evangelists who come here to Amsterdam 2000, getting the gospel message to unreached people groups is their greatest challenge.
Fast forward to 2025, the BGEA is heading to Berlin, marking a historic return to the city where Billy Graham held the first World Congress on Evangelism in 1966.
The city of Berlin has influenced the world in every field. What a place from which to shout to the world, Christ is the Savior.
However, this time the focus is solely on Europe's Christian leaders. In less than 2 weeks, more than 1,000 pastors and ministry leaders from 55 nations and territories will gather for the European Conference on Evangelism. BGEA President and CEO Franklin Graham says the theme for this year is from Romans 1:16.
Not being ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Why is that such an important message right now?
Paul just said, I'm not ashamed of it. This is what I believe. This is what I stand for. And this is the gospel that we preach. God uses the gospel to pierce people's hearts. How does it work? Wendy, I have no clue how it works. All I know is this is what God uses to save people. So we have to preach the whole gospel. We don't need to be ashamed of it. We got to teach his death, burial, resurrection, and God will bless it.
Graham says as many as 1,000 churches in Germany closed their doors last year. And that's why it's so important to be in Berlin and encourage the church to keep going.
We want to ignite a fire in Europe to where there's an excitement for evangelism, and the churches are willing to be bold and not ashamed of the gospel. We've got Ukrainian churches coming. We have churches coming from Russia. He said these countries are at war. Yes, they are, but the gospel is more powerful than any of that stuff.
25 years ago in Amsterdam, Graham told me,
God's called us to reach this world, and it's going to take all of us. And I tell you, there's not enough of us.
Do you still feel that way today, 25 years later?
Absolutely. The harvest is ready, but the laborers are few. And so, that's just a biblical principle. And that's why we've got to do more.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
And ask the Lord of the harvest for more. Gordon, back to you.
And that should be a prayer of every Christian. Pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. The wonderful thing, and it is a wonderful thing, is that we have the technical ability. We can literally preach the gospel around the world today. We can finish the Great Commission. If we really seek God and seek his face with everything within us, Lord, let us finish in our generation what you assigned us to do 2,000 years ago. And it would be wonderful if we could announce to the entire world this glorious gospel. So congratulations to Franklin Graham for all that they have done through the decades, both he and his father, mobilizing laborers for the harvest. Let's do this together. It's going to take the whole church preaching the whole gospel to the whole world. That was the cry decades ago. Let's continue that cry and finish it in our generation.